It has gotten so bad that when black boys want to do a good job in school, they're labeled sissies. It's gotten so bad when black youth want to do a good job in school, they're called, you're trying to act white. And that's deep.
Yo, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to Black Excellence Daily. I'm your host, Sean Croxton. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got the late, the great Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu on the show today. Unfortunately, he passed in April of this year, and it's just a really huge loss for our community. And, you know, there was a couple years where his YouTube videos would come across my For You page on YouTube, and I just wouldn't watch them for some reason. And then a couple years ago, I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch this one. And I was so impressed by his message and his delivery. And I said to myself, more people need to know about this. And so I started taking clips from his YouTube videos and making reels out of them for Instagram. And I started posting them. And gosh, I've got reels by Dr. Kunjufu that have 8 million views, 6 million views, 4 million views, 2 million views, 1 million views. Like, you pretty much can't go wrong with a reel by Dr. Kunjufu. And the reason why is because the message is so important. It's so relevant, even, 40 years after he recorded these videos. And we just need what he had. And it's unfortunate that he's gone now. And I'm just so happy that before he passed, I was able to help get his message out there to millions of people around the world. And the message that he has in this particular clip is about education and the value that we place on education and the impact that peer pressure can have on Black students. And also, he's going to talk about the importance of having role models. Of course, we are a lot better these days when it comes to role models than we were in the 1980s. However, we still have a big problem because for our young people, not all of them, but for a lot of them, you know, the role models might be rappers rapping about violence, rappers wearing next to nothing, shaking their booties on video and rapping about some of the most disgusting things I've ever heard of. And that's a problem within the culture that needs to be talked about more. It's talked about now more than I think it's ever been talked about before, but we need more voices to speak on this because music is powerful. You know, last week we talked about the subconscious mind and brainwaves, and how when you have the right brainwaves, it opens up your subconscious mind and messages and impressions start to go in there. And when we accept these messages that come from our music, they guide our actions and our decisions and our behaviors. And so we have to be better filters as adults and parents as to what our children are listening to. And one more point that I want to make is, you know, where he talks about in the beginning of his clip about acting white, which is something I had to deal with a little bit growing up. Like, I grew up in Oakland till I was 10 with both of my parents, and I was really good at school. And one of the rules that we had in my home from my parents toward myself and my brother was a 3 strikes rule. So if you spoke in slang, or maybe we might call it ebonics, growing up, we got a strike. And if you got 3 strikes, you couldn't watch TV that night. And so we learned, my brother and I, how to speak proper English. And I think that's been able to help us throughout our lives and our adulthood. And not to knock ebonics by any means. Like, there's room for different dialects and different cultures. I get it. But it's so important to be able to, you know, to speak the language. And I think we need more emphasis on that. But, you know, I was growing up and people were like, you sound white, or you act white. Or, oh, you did that well in school, man. You acting white. I just don't understand sometimes this whole idea because, you know, for several centuries, we were not allowed to read. And in 2025, some of us refuse to read. And for, like, after slavery, there was such an emphasis on education. And somehow in the 1960s, it flipped where being educated for some people meant that you were acting white. And I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I think we need to flip that. Those of us who are saying it need to stop saying it. Education is not white. education is universal, and it is one of the ways that we become successful and create generational wealth for our people. Dr. Kunjufu is coming up.
We apologize for going as fast as we are. We're condensing a 6-hour workshop into about an hour. And the first area I want to look at is the issue of the peer group. What we're concerned with here is that we believe that schools are more than academic institutions. They are also social institutions. In other words, very few of us have been trained on monitoring the peer group. And yet this may be one of our greatest competitors or influences on the minds of our children. It has gotten so bad that when black boys want to do a good job in school, they're labeled sissies. It's gotten so bad when black youth want to do a good job in school, they're called, you're trying to act white. And that's deep. Deep in two areas. First of all, here we are, the people that built the pyramids. First to read and write. And yet now we're going to attribute academic achievement to another race. That's problem number one. But problem number two, do you know how much pressure is on our youth? Trying to, on the one hand, please their peer group that has one set of values, and then please you, teachers and parents, with another set of values. A tremendous amount of pressure is on them, and we have to begin to understand that pressure. We were very much concerned about the Jackie Robinson syndrome. In other words, in the class of 30, we'll have our 1 or 2 black students in our gifted and talented programs, our honors programs, our AP programs. In other words, the Jackie Robinson syndrome all over again. In other words, we're going to take our 1 or 2 top black students and put them in the class of 30 students. Do you know what it's like being the Jackie Robinson of the class? And your peer group teasing you for being in there, and you have to be the only 1 or 2 in that kind of class? There are some other school districts who are trying to close the gap that realize if they want to increase the odds, stabilize black student achievement, 1 or 2 is not enough. In other words, some schools are now looking at, let's say, having 10 to 15 students in that kind of setting. So they can reinforce it not just academically, but also socially. Again, a tremendous amount of pressure, being the only 1 or 2 in the class. And you know what, some insensitive teachers in a setting like this, when they have to discuss a black issue, they ask the black child, well, what do you think about that? Do you know what it's like being the only black child, having to be the authority on all black issues, and you don't want to be black, no way, no how? A tremendous amount of pressure. So if we want to increase the odds, we have to increase the number of students in those classes, because schools are more than academic institutions. They are also social institutions as well, and we have to begin to look at that. We also believe that competition is healthy. In other words, we are very much concerned that many of our children are shying away from academic competition, and they are very much involved in athletic competition. In other words, we believe that competition is healthy. We believe it sharpens your skills. We believe that there's a psychology of performance, or let's be clear, the fear of failure. Many black youth are afraid of competing in academic activities and more confident in athletic activities. And what's sad is many schools allow it, not just in 9th grade, as early as 4th and 5th grade. We have many black youth shying away from academic competition and more involved in athletic competition. As I said earlier, we believe the competition sharpens your skills. And we believe that our youth need to be involved in both of these 2 particular areas. In other words, in integrated schools, not desegregated, in integrated schools, these principals have told me, if I have a 50-50 black-white school, then I don't want a 100% black basketball team and a 100% white science fair team or white debate team. And if it means going the extra step, like the Boston Celtics, to get some white ball players, I'm going to do that. If it means going the extra step to get some black students in debate and science fairs, I'm going to do that. Because they are committed to having students involved in both academic and athletic competition, because it sharpens your skills. And we are concerned about that. In other words, let's move away from the varsity approach to academics, where you only have the top 1 or 2 students representing the school. We believe in the intramural approach. We believe in a class of 30 students, let's have 6 teams of 5 players. Let's have everyone involved in athletics. Let's have everyone involved in academics, because competition sharpens the skills. But you know what's sad? Even schools give more glory to their ball players than their scholars. In other words, for the basketball winners, they get these big trophies. For the debate team, they get these little certificates. We're the pep rallies for the honor roll. In other words, we give them to the basketball team, but why not to the academic scholars and achievers as well? In other words, we are illustrating where our priorities are. We want to change that priority. We've got to find ways to infiltrate the peer group, to get them all involved in both academic and athletic competition. Some other ideas on this. The University of Michigan did a study when you and I were growing up, and they wanted to find out what was a major influence on children. The University of Michigan reports in 1950 that the greatest influence on children was the home, followed closely by school, then church, then peer group, then television. Now, Gwen, you probably call these the good old days. Home, school, church, peer group, and television. Hold your brothers will give you 1980, 1985. Home is still number one, but the streets, the peer group, that's what we're talking about, is now in the number 2 position. Television and video games are number 3, predicting number 1 sometime this year. School has now dropped down to the 4th position, and I'm sorry you can't find church anywhere on a map. A whole lot has happened in 30 years. I want to again pause and look at the peer group, your greatest source of competition. In other words, the power of the peer group is because they look like each other. You will always emulate those people that look like you. What am I getting at? To connect it to the classroom? I became a writer to make sure I'm not misquoted. A white teacher can teach a black child math because expectations transcend race. Don't misquote me. I'm in no way saying that a white teacher cannot teach a black child because expectations transcend race. But a white teacher cannot teach a black child how to be black. In other words, in order to be a black engineer, you need to see a black engineer. The power of the peer group, they look like each other. In other words, when I ask black boys across the country to name me 5 black male entertainers, they don't have a problem. Name 5 black male athletes, they don't have a problem. But when I ask them to name me 5 black men with college degrees, they have all kind of problems. In other words, if we cannot increase black staff at your school, then what I recommend you do, like what St. Louis is doing, is have a central role model program. So we begin to bring in black role models on a regular basis. So we don't want to take the white teacher out of class, but if he or she has to stay there, then we want every week or at least once a month role models coming in so our youth can see black achievers. And we need to centralize that kind of program. The power of the peer group, they look like each other. Another secret about the peer group. You see, in most classes, let me do it this way, I'll use another sheet. In most classrooms, you have 30 students and you have 1 teacher. And it's almost 30 against 1. That's how it's phrased. 30 against 1. You always lose with odds like that. We have got to find ways to get the odds in our favor. In other words, I recommend that a teacher identify who the leaders are. You see, we must get them to buy into our value system. We must find ways to infiltrate the peer group, to inculcate our value system into theirs. And that, first of all, means identifying who the leaders are. And let me give you a secret. The leaders don't walk around saying, with a T-shirt, I'm the leader, I'm running the class. They do it with body language. They do it with eye contact. And so the first step is, do you know how to identify the leader? And then once you do, either before school, after school, or some break, pull him or her over to the side and try to inculcate your value system into theirs. Then they will begin to proselytize the other parts of the peer group. We have got to get more of the peer group buying into our value system. You see, the peer group does not have to be negative. It can also be positive. The question is, which value system they're going to promote? We have to begin to look at those kinds of issues. And so we recommend these kinds of strategies for the peer group. We recommend that, first of all, we begin to put more priorities on our academic achievement over athletic achievement. We also recommend moving away from the varsity approach to the intramural approach. We recommend that you identify who the leaders are. We recommend we bring in more role models to our program, provide pep rallies for academic achievement. But my major concern here is that schools are more than academic institutions. They are also social institutions. It is sad to say this, but you could have been doing your job. Parents could have been doing their job. And it all go for naught because the Black and Hispanic peer group are reinforced what kind of gym shoes they wear, what kind of clothes they wear, how well they fight or dance, and not academic achievement. This is not theoretical. I was in honors classes when I was in high school, and I was so influenced by my peer group, I flunked the whole marking period intentionally, trying to get kicked out. Had it not been for my father, who then kicked my butt, I'd had some very serious problems realizing his size 11 of my rear end was more important than my peer group. But let me give you a secret. When you want to reinforce academic achievement, especially for Black boys, it becomes suicidal if he's not also involved in the martial arts. In other words, I was still in honors programs, but I was allowed to run track and also in martial arts because my peer group did not respect my honors achievement, but they did respect my martial arts belt. We have to begin to look at those kinds of areas. Before we move on to the next area with regards to parents, any comments about the peer group? Its tremendous impact on academic achievement.
That was the late, great Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. You can watch today's talk on YouTube. It is called Developing Positive Self-Images in Black Children, 1988, Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. We've got Dr. Dennis Kimbrough tomorrow, and then we wrap things up with Michael Collier talking about dreaming big and making yourself a vision board. Have a good day. I'm out. Peace.